Hi ladies and gentlemen, Mori from here again. The topic that I'll be discussing, like the header states, is to be weary of possession from lower astral entities and whatnot, and the grief that they can cause and what attracts them, generally speaking. It is the case that when you see someone, let's just say someone that whose life took a turn for the worse. For example, that person was a normal human being, and then after a rough patch, or after hitting a rough patch, after going through something that wasn't pleasant, to be exact, so going through some unpleasant event in his or her life, that person ends up alongside the street like a hobo, so a homeless person, or that person starts doing drugs and alcohol on a heavy set basis, and he or she starts to deteriorate. I'm not saying that this is every time the case, but in some cases, these people are have been latched onto by an undesirable astral parasite. And you might ask yourself, what are astral parasites? Astral parasites are simply low-level astral spirits. Okay, these are also spirits, but let's just say that they're the vermin equivalent of spirits. They're the parasitic equivalent of spirits. So they're literally more or less the lowest of the low, what you can imagine in terms of spirits. It's the same thing as having an unkept house. If you don't clean your house, you're a sloth, you're a pig, you just throw garbage around the house, then all of a sudden you're going to start seeing vermin. You're going to start seeing cockroaches, rats, and whatnot. And these are, generally speaking, undesirable for any normal human being that knows what proper hygiene is. Sorry. So it's also the same case for the spirit world, okay, specifically the astral realm. Whenever someone goes through something traumatic, if there are astral spirits nearby, parasitic ones, then they'll, metaphorically speaking, come running. Again, it's like the example that I hinted just now, the metaphorical example. If you start throwing garbage around your house all of a sudden and you don't clean up after yourself, then you're going to start getting vermin sooner or later. Okay, where they were previously non-existent, where you couldn't even see them, where they were not present. Grief, generally speaking, as well as other negative astral emotions such as anger, excessive, we're talking about significantly excessive anger, hatred, regret, sorrow, all of these things attract spirits, okay? But they don't attract good spirits, they attract parasitic spirits that feed off of this negative energy. And what these spirits do is they try to keep you in that state of mind to the point where you simply deteriorate as a human being, where you become so dilapidated to the point where you just end up alongside the street. And this has happened to people, okay? This is on a global level, but I've seen it happen to people, one or two people at the very least, a couple of them. These people are normal people, they had decent jobs, they had decent lives, they were of a sound mind, so that means they were sane, they were normal mentally, they were healthy, more or less, and after, for example, a loved one dying, someone that they held dear to them, or some other traumatic event taking place in their life, they just never recover, they never bounce back, and they start losing their house, they start losing their job, and it just keeps going downhill from there for them. All the way up until the point where you see that person begging alongside scraps on the side of the street, or looking for scraps in a trash can, only looking like literally just a homeless person, only a former glimmer of himself or herself. Other people resort to doing heavy set drugs and alcohol, and that only makes things worse. There's also a general saying or a general statement. I haven't confirmed this, to be honest, but there's a general saying that alcohol also attracts low-level spirits. That's why alcohol is also called poison. And specifically, I read somewhere that the name alcohol is derived from, I think, from a word called algul in a foreign language. For example, Arabic or some other language. But that's where the phrase ghoul comes from. Okay, again, I can't confirm any of this, or I better say I haven't confirmed any of this. But generally speaking, it is true. Okay, not based on what I just said, but based on my own observation, knowledge, and experience. Then it's true. So I'm assuming based on my own knowledge and experience, aside from the whole alcohol being a reference to Al Ghul and whatnot, I can come to a relatively fair conclusion that it has to be accurate, okay? It has to be at least partially accurate. But bottom line is, assuming that that is the case, assuming that it is true, then alcohol is indeed derived from Al Ghul, and it's said that consuming large quantities of alcohol will attract low-level parasitic spirits. So alcohol is derived from Al Ghul, that's how it's pronounced, I think. I don't know, Middle Eastern, Arabic or whatnot, or something similar, a similar language. And that's where the phrase ghoul comes from. Of course, most of us know what ghoul means. Ghoul simply references a, generally speaking, malevolent spirit or an entity. Ghoul, ghoul. The same goes for drugs too. Again, keep in mind what I said in the beginning. I'm not saying that every time you see someone shooting themselves up with drugs to the point where they overdose and die, or where people drink themselves to death literally and figuratively. I'm not saying, or when someone's homeless, or when you see these crazy guys just talking to themselves on the street with not having any teeth, and just the general image of that the general image that comes to mind whenever we as human beings think of a homeless person, someone that is undesirable, someone who is not groomed at all, has a huge beard, disgusting, hasn't bathed in months, or years potentially even, or at the very least days. So I'm not saying that whenever you see someone like that, that is the case. So you shouldn't go like, oh, that person is possessed by a lower level astral spirit or something. No. Okay, there are normal rational reasons, okay, for why some people end up in such a debilitating condition, or when people find themselves in such a debilitating condition when they're literally down in the dumps. But in some cases, it is true that these people, similar to vermin, the example that I hinted at earlier, that these people, the grief that they experienced, brought them in such a mental state or such an astral state, in such a state of mind that it automatically attracted, for their own, unfortunately for them, okay, for their own misfortune, it attracted lower level astral parasitic spirits, or parasitic spirits that just happen to be nearby. And what that spirit does, that spirit literally just, like I said, it feeds off the energy, and it will do everything in its power pretty much to keep its host in such a state of mind. So you can imagine, if you've got a parasitic spirit, if you have a parasitic spirit that feeds off of grief, for example, a couple, there was a normal couple, a man and a woman, they were married, and the husband loses his wife, and he loved his wife so much that the grief took a toll on him. It was like getting hit by a car, only the astral or the mental version, the emotional version. Generally speaking, regardless of how hard someone takes something, at some point that person recovers and bounces back. Time heals all wounds, as the saying goes. I'm not going to discuss whether that's true or not, because it's not black and white, but generally speaking, it is true. Time does heal all wounds. But all of a sudden you're seeing that person simply doesn't recover, but instead of that person gets worse. If a parasitic spirit has latched onto that person, that parasite will literally just try to keep that person in such a state of mind, in such a horrendously bad state of mind, because it feeds off of that energy. It feeds off of your pain, your agony, and your sorrow. And again, as a result, you can't go through that. You can't go like that through life, okay? You can't go through life ridiculously depressed. And that's how people pretty much end up alongside the street or in a similar condition. Because you can't function like a normal human being in such a state of mind, in a state of extended sorrow or extreme sorrow or grief. And that's when your entire life will go downhill. You won't be able to perform at work, you'll be laid off, you won't be able to find other work, or you'll lose those jobs quickly to the point where you've run out of jobs to apply to in your location or in your region. And it just goes on. All of a sudden, before you know it, you can't pay your bills anymore, and you're out the door. You're literally out the door, out on the street, out on your ass, you name it. Yeah. So this is something that I do want to advise people, okay, to be wary of that. I'm not saying that you should become paranoid every time something really bad happens to you, but it's not advised to stay in such a bad mental state or such a bad astral state, such a bad emotional state. If you go through something traumatic, something that is really that was really too horrible for words, more or less, then you're allowed to mourn or you're allowed to grieve, but still think about it rationally, okay? If someone close to you died, let's just say a couple of weeks worth of grieving or a month at the longest is more than enough. It doesn't matter how long you love that person. Again, you should listen to your own intuition and just rational thinking. If you find that you still can't recover, then either see a shrink, so a psychiatrist or a psychologist. But in any case, do whatever you can to alleviate yourself from that state of mind that you found yourself in. Try to go on vacation, try to come to terms with the fact that life goes on and that nothing lasts forever. So neither should whatever it is that you lost. What you lost will then make more sense. Just go on vacation, enjoy nature, enjoy doing whatever it is that you do, even if it's something mundane. You'll notice that it will distract you from your grief to the point where you're no longer grievous, or you're no longer grievous, sorry. To the point where you're no longer sorrowful, okay? You don't find yourself in an emotional state anymore, you're no longer down in the dumps. That black cloud isn't hanging over your head anymore, okay? You've managed to pull yourself out of that emotional state and you're mentally healthy again, more or less. You still haven't forgotten what happened, but you just accept it from a theoretical perspective, okay? So the consensus here is simply that shit happens and life goes on, period. So that's simply it, okay? That's what I wanted to discuss and to bring to people's attention. Sometimes, yeah, stuff like that happens. When people end up in the loony bin, or better said, when they end up in a psych ward, when they end up in a mental asylum, when they end up insane, okay, bluntly put, mentally disturbed and all, or similar when they do heavy sets of drugs, alcohol, and when they simply find themselves alongside the street, literally those kinds of people. In some cases, I'm not saying that that's the case every time, but in some cases, these people have been possessed or being latched on or being fed off of by an astral entity, a parasitic low-level astral spirit. And that spirit, that spirit keeps his or her host in check. That spirit keeps its host in check by seeing to it that you don't recover mentally, or that you don't recover astrally or emotionally from your grief. It will try to, it will do its best to not only feed your grief, but make it significantly worse by having you become neurotic, by having the same thought going over and over again in your head, the same thing, horrible thing that happened, reliving that same moment. Those are the ideas, for example, that it will implement in you or in your mind. And you can imagine that way you can't possibly recover. It's similar to a blood-sucking leech, okay? The same way, when leeches attach themselves to a host that they suck blood off of, or ticks, for example, if I'm not mistaken, they have some kind of anticoagulant property in their saliva that makes it so that your blood doesn't harden, okay? It doesn't coagulate naturally, so your blood stays fluid. Or at least the hole that they drilled in your body, if they're feeding off of you, the area around that tiny hole or that syringe part that they just stuck their so-called needle into will remain fluid, okay? That's how they continue to suck blood. That's 101. That's the basic goal of every parasite, to not only suck blood, but to keep sucking blood, and that's how they do it. And it's no different for parasitic spirits. That spirit will prevent you from becoming emotionally and astrally and mentally healthy again by keeping you stuck in that same thought pattern, or those same thought patterns and that same frame of mind, to the point where you can't think about anything else except for your grief and your sorrow and your pain and misery and agony. And it will just feed off of you as much as possible, to the point where it can't feed off of you anymore. But in most cases, it can continue to feed off of you, at the very least for the rest of your life, okay, until you die. And yeah, in some cases, that's what's happened to The people that you see that are now hobos, that are now homeless, crazy people talking to themselves, ungroomed and all, with looking disgustingly dirty, or junkies, there's junkies shooting themselves with drugs now and then, or not now and then, but almost non-stop, that to the point where they overdose, or people that just take a heavy set of drugs and alcohol, okay? Imagine someone at a bar, that person, someone who drinks at a bar non-stop. Have you ever seen someone at a bar that drinks regularly? Let's just say that person is there, that person is a patron there at that bar, and that person just drinks 4 or 5 hours a day. That person, no normal person does that, point one, and point two, no normal person does that. That's point one. And point two, in practically every case, or at the very least 9 out of 10 cases, does that person look appealing as a human being? No. When you see some guy drinking at the bar, some slob, what does he look like? He looks ungroomed, he has a gigantic beer belly, he looks disoriented, he looks like he's constantly tired, mentally as well as physically fatigued. He can barely stand on his own 2 legs. That's not exactly the ideal image of a human being or of a person, to say the least, okay, to say the very least. So yeah, and there you go, okay, that's an example. So similar to the example that I gave in the beginning, okay, keeping a clean house is essential to keeping out vermin. It also applies to one's astral state, okay, one's mental, astral, and to a lesser extent one's physical state. If you don't take care of yourself on every one of these fronts, but relating to this topic or subject matter, specifically to the astral part, then yeah, sooner or later you're in danger of something like that happening. Again, I'm not saying that this is something that happens often, okay, or that it happens frequently even, but in every now and then it can happen. It all depends on the circumstances. It doesn't mean that if you find yourselves down in the dumps or depressed for 2 to 3 months, that automatically parasitic spirits will come running. But if you find yourself longer than if you find yourself in such a horrendous state of mind and you're noticing that you're not recovering, even after a year, then I would strongly advise you to seek mental help. At least going to a psychologist or a shrink. At the very least that. And last but not least, general cleansing techniques, esoteric cleansing techniques also apply to this. Okay, these spirits, these parasites can also be removed by just performing banishing rituals and similar. Or for people that aren't knowledgeable on the occult from an amateuristic perspective, cleansing yourself by taking a bath with taking a salt bath, since salt cleanses negative energies, specifically astral energy. Also with garlic, aside from salt, and the likes, you know. I discussed this in a previous video, but you'll have to pardon me. I can't put my finger on what video that was anymore. But in any case, general cleansing techniques will do, okay? Burning incense in your bedroom or the room in which you occupy yourself the most. These are all notable examples. That's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.